Hi, I'm Jeremy, the host of Untold Stories, a podcast that talks about, obviously, the untold stories of business leaders around the region. And today we have a really interesting guest today. Also a topic that is close to my heart, a topic that I think gets under the radar a little bit too much. And we have today with me Charlene, who is the founder of ABC, and she will talk a bit more about the topic that she loves and covers and has been in for more than a decade. Yeah.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for having me. All right. So, I've been in this industry for some time. I started off as a therapist. I started very early in my second year of degree, actually. And at that point of time, I was so sure I wanted to be a clinical psychologist. Till today, I am not a clinical psychologist. But I had this plan set out for myself that I would do my degree in psychology. I wanted to be ahead of everybody else. So I wanted to get some work experience. That's how it started for me. In the second year, I applied to be an ABA therapist. And I got the job.
So for everyone, what ABA is in long form is
Applied Behavior Analysis.
And how does that what does that cover? Who does it help?
Okay, good question. So ABA, the misconception is ABA is for supports people with autism. That's not true. ABA is just a science of teaching.
I see.
The principles of ABA is applied every day in our lives.
Got it.
So for example, how many of us would go to work if we're not going to get a paycheck at the end of the month? So it's based on reinforcement. So essentially ABA, there are many ways of teaching, but essentially what it is using the principles of reward and motivation to shape behavior. So when we are teaching, people and children with autism, we break skills down and we reinforce appropriate or correct behavior. So that's how I started.
Okay.
So that's ABA.
Yes.
I was an ABA therapist.
Yes.
I started in my second year of degree. I started off with 9 hours a week of work, and I moved up to 15 hours. Now in retrospect, I'm not sure how I managed to be a full-time student and also a part-time ABA therapist, but I did it. So by the time I finished my degree, I completely fell in love with the job. It started off very intentional for me to get work experience, but I didn't know at that point of time it would kind of shape my career. So I fell in love with it because I was assigned to a little boy, Daniel. He was 2.5 when I started with him. He was non-verbal. He was considered moderate to severe on the spectrum. And of course, at that point of time, I didn't know. I was completely new to this field. But he went from completely non-verbal to verbal child. He went to school within the 2.5 years that I worked with him. And then it just drew on me with the right support, the right methodology. We can literally change lives. And at that point of time, me, even though as a student, learning this methodology for the first time, I changed a life, and that was so fulfilling for me. So that's how it started for me. And then I was a fresh grad with 2 years of experience, and that's really not enough to start anything on your own. So I continued to work for about 4 to 5 years prior to starting ABC. So I did have some baby steps before ABC.
Just starting out, right?
Autism Behavioral Center, Yes. So ABC officially opened in 2016. But prior to that, I had a sole proprietor company called Autism Consultancy. I didn't have money, so all of our services were home-based services. So within the span of 4 years, I grew from a one-person company, which was me. I was a therapist, I was the accountant, I was the secretary, everything, you start with that. But within 4 years, I grew the team to about 30 staff, So also, I'm not sure how I did that because we didn't really have an office that we could all meet. So I had to kind of do all of the trainings, 30 times, for example, for 30 staff and provide supervision.
Well, in our world, the systems world today is not efficient, but
you start that way, right? You make it work. And so I had that experience, and then we were very lucky that we had an investor come in the beginning for ABC, and that's where how officially ABC Bangsar came about. I did have some help. And now it's been 8 years actually for us, and 3 centers. Yes, exactly, and 3 centers later. So we have 3 branches.
So how many people have you helped? Number that you've helped in these 8 years now?
I would say probably close to 1,000 or a little bit more, because right now in this current time with 3 centers, we are serving about 100 families.
I see.
And this is just in 6 months. This is how many people that we're already working with. Families come and go. Some stay with us long term. I believe quite a few.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, thank thank you for that background. It gives us, this is a topic I'm really excited to jump into. But let me start with the broad topic around autism, right?
Sure.
Which is a topic obviously you're very familiar with. Just to get right into it, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about autism in Malaysia that you see currently? I mean, whether is it as visual or as vivid as like people are still staring and like, oh, this guy is weird, this kid is weird, or anything that you've noticed that just makes big misconceptions that people sort of take to such people.
Sure. So what I often see, especially because my role currently is more client-facing, I deal more with the families upon enrollment, and I meet all sorts of families sharing with me their stories, how they came to ABC. And the biggest misconception is often autism or any form of developmental delays is associated with disability or inability to do certain things.
So should we take away the word disability when we talk about autism?
I mean, there's a lot of talk about this, using, appropriate terms.
So what would you consider appropriate term?
Wow. Okay, I would say just being neurodivergent, right? Because we have what we call typical or neurotypical.
Neurotypical.
And anything diverts to the norm is divergent. Yeah, but it doesn't also mean it's less. So but again, when we think neurodivergent, that's a stereotype. Even though we don't think of it, we already think of less. So often when I meet families and their child has vocalization, the child has words, their first few sentences to me, but Charlene, I don't think he has autism, he can speak. And I'm like, it doesn't mean that you can speak. It doesn't mean that you have autism. So you don't have autism, because it's such a big spectrum. The media often displays the two polar opposites. Either the individual is incredibly severe, they're non-verbal, they require full care around the clock. And then you have the savants, the highly capable in math or arts or music. And everything in between often doesn't get a lot of attention. But a lot of the people that we serve, the children that we serve, tend to fall in the middle. So that's often the misconception. Is like, if my child is speaking, there is no way he could have autism,
I see.
But being able to speak and communicate are two different skills.
Got it. So I think that's something for people to know, because I think it's a topic that is I see myself has been increasing in the media, which I guess is always a tell that people care more about it. Is that something that you've noticed as well, that people care a lot more about it in recent days?
I believe a lot more attention has been on autism for a couple of reasons, but personally, from ABC's perspective, and I believe this would be the same for just how many intervention centers have sprouted since COVID, we are getting a lot more families that have access to information, they are educated, they have the resources, they're doing their homework. And 8 years ago when we first started ABC, the average enrollment age would be 7 years old.
I see.
And today it is 2.5 years old, and this is the span of 8 years. So that's great for us because the data and science tells us with early intervention we get the best outcomes. So our really young kids are doing so well in the program. They're bridging developmental milestones faster than the older kids because the older kids have bigger gaps to bridge. So all of this happens, I believe, through education and access to information. That's really helped because more people are talking about it. There's more awareness, there's more information available. Definitely there has been an increase of awareness.
That's great. I'm so glad to hear that. I've had friends who had kids who have autism, and I mean, previously there used to be a much bigger stigma around that, but nowadays a lot of people are a lot more open to understanding how it works and not think of it as, like you said, a bad thing, but something just divergent, right? Or unique. That's another unique individuals, right? So using words that bring out the best in them rather than make them always already feel there's something different. But okay, let's go to some tougher topics though. Like you said, you serve 1,000 kids and their families, I guess, and that's more than that. But I'm sure in Malaysia or just in KL itself, there are many more, right?
Correct.
And autism doesn't discriminate, but obviously you serve only a small group of people. So what are your thoughts around that? Isn't it something that everyone who has a child with autism should be able to access, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree, and
Yeah.
I wish that was the case in
Okay.
Malaysia.
Okay, so the wish is a big thing. So
yeah,
why?
I wish, right?
Yeah.
And I believe our families wish this too.
Oh, 100%.
Because I mean, often a lot of families come to us and they, Charlene, they'll tell me honestly, if I could afford it, I would pick ABC any day. But the reality is we can't do this long term. The landscape in Malaysia is the reason why there's so many service providers, private service providers, is obviously because there is a need, and there is a huge variation from the ones that have group settings to one-to-one settings and different forms of intervention that comes with different standards and different costs as well. But the biggest challenge, particularly with ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, is the gold standard of autism treatment. And if you notice, of course, you always want to give your child the best.
Oh, of course.
But the gold standard also comes with an amount of hours to produce that kind of outcome that we want.
And the right therapists, the right people involved as well, who are well trained, and all that, right? Yeah.
So ABA, when done correctly, and when you have the resources, when everything is ideal, you should the child should be receiving 30 to 42 hours a week of one-to-one services.
That's a lot. That's a work week.
Exactly. It's a work week, but children are working to develop their, their speech, communication, behavior, and social skills. But the reality is how many people can actually afford essentially a private tutor to work with your child 30 to 42 hours a week, and that limits down to probably T5, not even T20, you know. So in ABC, how we have tackled this is, yes, of course, we have the intensive services for families that can afford it, but we also have reduced hours, we have parent trainings, the costs are much less, but we equip parents to run the intervention at home. We have kind of pivoted to do our best to support families from various socio-economic backgrounds. But the reality is, for the best outcomes, you need the hours. Because often even our very young children, say for example 3 years old, a very common profile we get, you may be 36 months or 30 months, but the developmental milestones, the gap is already more than 12 months, more than a year. So with 1 year worth of gap, if you were to do, for example, 1 or 2 hours of therapy a week, is that going to be sufficient to bridge the gap of 1 year, for example? And that's the answer is often no.
Wow.
And that's why you need the hours, right? Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so I'm going to ask a bit more of the cutting question here. So it feels like you want to offer to everyone, and it's about the money, essentially, because you are a business, you're not for profit, and you need to make money. And you're getting highly trained people who can really do their job well, gold standards. Do you think that the guys from the top can come down to give more support, and do you feel that there's enough given at this point for any Malaysian to bring their child and have that kind of support that they need?
Yeah, I think in terms of support, I will speak for all of the families out there. It's definitely not enough. As I've mentioned, if they had the funding, they would always want to pick the best, you know. But the reality is, even for many of our families that can afford it, the question is, how long can they do this for? I mean, it's like paying for your child's college fees from the time they are 18 months, you know. So it is a lot of money. So of course, having more support is important, but I've shared a lot. This is literally a chicken and egg situation. In Malaysia there is still, whether we like it or not, there is still a large stereotype, often a negative stereotype, associated with learning disabilities. So firstly, even though we have the OKU card that families can register their child, a majority of the families will opt not to. But in the end of the day is, the government can't do much if they don't have the data, correct? So for example, in the population of 1 million and only 100 people register their child as OKU under developmental delays, that doesn't trigger the government to pay much attention to this population of people, because the data is not telling you that you should pay attention. So that's step number one. So I do encourage families, because data, that's how, I mean, in any organization, society, often decisions should be driven by data, same like ABA. And I believe the government there are so many issues, right? We are not just the one issue that they have to deal with. So when you have 1 million and one, decisions to make, and everybody is putting their hand up to, hey, listen to me, hey, listen to me. How do we determine who you should pay attention to?
Of course, where does autism rank on that scale, right?
Correct. We need the numbers. So number one is definitely, we need more families coming forward and giving the data to the nation that, hey, my child is on the spectrum, or my child has some level of developmental delay that's been diagnosed, like ADHD, for example. You have the OKU card and the data is stored. Now, I also understand where families are coming from, because often having the OKU card closes doors for their child. So this is the reality.
Please, elaborate on that.
So a lot of schools turn around and said, my child, my school is not equipped to support a child with autism or ADHD or dyslexia, for example. And that's why I can tell you again, on behalf of the families, a lot of the families are reluctant, because instead of providing, they are getting more benefits, more doors are closed for their children. So that's one thing. So if the data, we don't have sufficient data, we can't move forward to provide more for the people, So as much as it's easy to just blame the government, I don't have the exact statistics. But I can share with you, with every 10 families that meet us and have a formal diagnosis, one will register their child with an OKU card.
Wow, so imagine that number extrapolated to...
Exactly. So I believe that the challenges we're facing and the amount of people that we should be serving is definitely exponentially more. But a lot of them are flying under the radar for many reasons. Not everyone can access intervention, even the affordable interventions. So there are a lot of children and individuals that are going without any form of intervention. I mean, that's just how it is, because this is we have a huge difference of the socioeconomic backgrounds, so not everyone can. The reality is, in the cities like KL, people are more accepting because they have more resources. But the moment you come out, some people don't know what autism is, and there are many schools that I've met many that they may not know what they're working with, but they're willing to support. That's incredible, So there is that openness, but often a lot of families come to us and they're really frustrated because the diagnosis, or when they start to see the red flags, often schools use this as a reason. But again, coming from an education perspective, right? Also, it's the ethics. If they were to keep a child that has more needs than what they can support in the school, it's also not ethical for them. So when I look at it from the perspective of the teachers, I understand where they're coming from. How do you support a child when you don't know how to support them? But I think the argument with most families is they just see the card, or they see a piece of paper with a diagnosis. They don't even meet the child and the door is closed. But the spectrum is so big.
Wow, okay. So, I mean, this looks like a gridlock there, and no clear answer. We're looking to someone to make this a lot more accessible. I know you guys are doing your best at ABC to already make that with the different kinds of methods that you use, but I think this looks like a problem that is still wide-reaching based on the statistics. So, it's just given 1 out of 10 numbers and all that. So, I think we have a long way to go, and hopefully as this becomes more, people get more well-read, more knowledgeable on autism and topics around such, then this will get better. But thank you for that sharing. That's very insightful. I mean, let's go a little bit to the caregivers. I think that's another big group, right? Because they also suffer, because not just emotionally but mentally. Just the card itself can really be a mental block for them. And like, how do I deal with this? What if I can't bring them to the right school? And there's just so many decisions that break out of making one bad one, right? So let's talk about caregivers and their burnout, right? I mean, you probably met many families that they come to you later, and they probably already have struggled for years. Share any stories that you might have about that, and how caregivers can manage children with autism.
It's honestly not easy, because I think dealing with a normal / neurotypical child is already challenging enough.
Tell me about it. I have two. I feel like I'm dying. Some days.
Make sure your wife is not listening.
I love them. My 2 daughters, I love you, but no, they give me headaches some days.
So it's tough, right? Because you're dealing with a little human with needs, and then at some point they're vocal, they can tell you what they want, what they don't want. But now you have a child that has different needs, and you may not be equipped with the skills to support them. So often with autism, what we see mostly is a lack of communication skills. They may want or need something, but they don't have the words to communicate efficiently, and we see behaviors.
Yes.
And this is really challenging because, even in therapy, again, I really have an amazing team behind ABC, but working with children intensively for 6 hours, 7 hours a day is challenging. But imagine now the parents having to do this, kind of around the clock, especially on weekends, know. The biggest challenge I would say is for most families is, yes, you have the clinical support from us, and many families do appreciate it and take full advantage of the training so that they can apply it at home. But the reality is, for many families, you come home, you've had a long day at work, you're tired.
I want to Netflix and chill.
Exactly. But your child has needs and they can't communicate their needs, and they're having a behavior and a lot of children and specifically children on the spectrum, they have poor sleeping habits. So a lot of them sleep very late, or they wake up in the middle of the night, and of course when they wake up, then daddy and mommy wakes up too. Some of them may have attachment problems. They won't do anything without you. I mean, it's such a huge spectrum. So it's like a typical neurotypical child having needs, and then you times this by 10, So it's really, really a lot. So often I share with families, and again, this is also challenging, I think, in our culture. It's starting to open up. More people are saying that I'm going to my therapist, for example. It's more acceptable now versus 10 years ago. But a lot of families that send their children for therapy because they are a child with special needs, the reality is it will impact the whole dynamics of the family.
Of course.
It will impact, like, say, if I had a husband, that would impact my relationship with my husband. It would impact my relationship with my other children. So often, with the right support, families need support too. So they need to see if they have access and time, of course. It's very helpful to see a family therapist or a therapist. It's really also sad because families get broken apart with a diagnosis.
I won't be surprised. I won't be surprised.
Parents go through divorces,
divorces happen for much lesser than this. So what
Correct.
more, right? Such
You're
a
right.
situation.
And generally having one child on the spectrum would mean so much more attention being put on this child. It comes at a cost to the other children.
Of
so
course.
Having a child with special needs, it really just shifts everything. And it'll be great that if families have a support system. I know some families do, and we try to do that for our families as well, because some of our children that are ready for small social groups, we put them in groups. They have similar skills, and we work on their social skills, and of course we send these videos home back to the families, and then the families like, wow, my child is really enjoying time with that child, and now the parents get together and do their little play dates over the weekend. But this is also a support system, because essentially families need someone who can understand them. And often if you have a child with special needs, regardless of what it is, it could be medical needs or psychological needs or developmental needs, it's very difficult to relate to somebody who is not experiencing what you're experiencing. And it's the same for me. I'm coming from a clinical background. I don't have a child with special needs. And of course we have all of these clinical recommendations, but I can't fully say that I 100% understand how these families coping. It must not be easy.
Of course. I mean, there's no quick answer to this situation, because it's long drawn. Autism is something that you have to live with, right?
Correct,
you can get better, but families will have to make sacrifices, right? To make things work.
There's a lot of sacrifices need to be met. The best families I've worked with, honestly, like, of course not everybody is going to go through a divorce and the family breaks apart. But we have unfortunately seen that, but it, like I said, it takes a huge toll on the family. But the families that really push through are the families that the husband and wife are really committed, and they're together, they're on the same page, and they work together. They have a shared goal, and they work together towards it. And we have some pretty incredible supporting families. And it's really nice to see that we're in meetings and they support each other. And just like any relationship, that's of course what we want, but now you add in another factor, having a child with with special needs,
Yes.
it's even more important to have that support between
Nice.
you and your
Yeah,
spouse.
100%. I mean, normal life, every spouse should be supportive of each other, but
Correct.
what more, right?
Correct.
In
But it's
such
difficult, lah.
situations, yes.
It's very difficult. It's
I
easier
totally
said than
understand.
done.
I
Yeah.
understand. I mean, I sometimes go with my wife over the smallest things around our kids. So what more? Like you say, if times 10, then everything gets
Yeah.
amplified. So I'm sure we could have a whole topic around that, but I think we don't have enough time today. I think I want to end off with a few questions. So, I mean, you have already told us probably a few of the untold stories, or is there any thing around the business that you built with ABC and with being in this industry for that long? What was the toughest challenge in running this ABC for the past 8 years?
Often because we are currently the largest one-to-one
Yes.
intervention
Yes.
center in Malaysia. So, of course, there's all that, wow, you're the biggest, you're the
It's always
largest.
nice. It's always-
But to get there were many doors that were closed. So, especially during autism consultancy time, I actually tried to open a center twice, and both of it didn't come to reality. And one of it actually made the news. And again, I don't speak about it much simply because we are just in a different part of our journey right now.
Of
But
course.
it's good to remember kind of where we were 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, we tried to open, and again, this wasn't ABC yet. It was Autism Consultancy. I tried to open a center in a house, full transparency to the owner. She knew the nature of our business,
I
what
see.
we did. And we opened for 24 hours. We did an
Wow.
open day, and
Oh.
within 24 hours, the neighbors came.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, what are you doing here? And I explained, we work with children with
Yeah.
autism. We were like, no, we don't want any schools. We don't want any children with autism, here in our neighborhood. It was a gated and guarded neighborhood in Cheras. But what was actually very heartbreaking, Jeremy, was I realized then how little the awareness was on autism. So they called an emergency meeting with all of the community.
Oh, wow.
So they all came
Really
to the
intense.
house. I sat there with then my other supervisor,
Yeah.
both of us. I said, you know what? I'll explain to you, this is what autism, this is
Yeah.
the work that we do.
Yeah.
Full transparency to the owner. She knows what we are doing
Yeah.
here. She
Yeah.
allowed us to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah.
We don't mean to be in anybody's hair, but we are doing good work here.
Oh, of course.
However, I respect all of you.
Yeah.
So if all of you vote for us to go out and you don't welcome us here, then I will pack my bags and
Sure,
leave.
sure.
So there was about 20 to 30 residents
Yeah.
that came for the meeting. And I remember I was in the middle of the room with my supervisor, and we went around the circle. And everybody said, no, we want you
Wow.
out. And I remember I was crying,
Oh my gosh.
This was like 10 years ago. I was crying, and you feel so defeated because, when even if you want to run a business, and that point of time, it wasn't even a business. I was trying to
Yeah,
do
I
something,
get it.
you're trying to set something off, and then you have this, and you have a bunch of people that have just no mercy almost. And that's how we started. So within 24 hours, we left.
You left.
But again, remember, I didn't have much money.
Yes,
Whatever
yes.
I had, I put into
Yeah, fair
setting
enough.
this up.
Yeah.
And within 24 hours, we left.
Oh gosh.
But that opened so many doors for us, Jeremy. So I went to social media on this.
Oh, yeah.
I was really frustrated.
Oh.
And I just put it on my page. But then it kind of blew up to everyone.
Wow.
Within 3 days, I was getting calls from everybody. Everybody wanted to cover it. And I was
Oh,
really
wow.
honest. I'm like, if you want to cover the sad story about this,
Yeah.
I'm not interested. So the only space that I said yes to doing an interview was BFM. I declined everybody else actually,
Wow.
because everybody wanted to make this a whole.
Of course,
I wasn't
yeah.
interested in that.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
intention was clear. Like there is a huge gap with acceptance.
Yeah.
The problem here was acceptance, and I remember with the words of one of the residents. She was like, "Oh, if this was a normal daycare, I don't mind, but because they're autistic, no." And that just really broke my heart. But now, in retrospect, that was 10 years ago,
Yes.
And because it kind of blew up in the media, a lot of people reached out to me to help. And one of them being a reputable clinic, and they told me like, hey, we have a space for you. I know you kind of lost everything,
Yeah.
but if you want a room to run your services, at least you can kind of
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
So I took it up. We did that for 2 to 3 years. This was in Baby and Beyond in Publica.
Okay.
They were just so gracious, the doctors, and we kind of picked everything up and started again. We started small, And then again, after a couple of years, we were presented with an opportunity that I couldn't say no to, an investor.
Yeah.
And that's how ABC came about. So we had really humble beginnings of essentially being thrown out of a community to now being the largest.
Wow.
Yeah, of course, at that point, Jeremy, I was really frustrated, angry, upset. I was so full of emotions, and it was like my passion project. And I'm like, wow, I couldn't even get it off the ground. But this is the thing about me, when you're in a community, it's really important who your neighbors are. This is even in the where I live. That's important, you know. If they just have no support behind you, it's very difficult. Because I remember, you know, within the 24 hours, we enrolled one child, I remember. Oh. And it was so bad because the child was coming for his first day of therapy. And the boom gate, the residents
didn't allow.
I wouldn't blame the guard. The poor guard doesn't know what's going on.
Like,
but they told the guard not to let any of our visitors in. So this poor little 2.5-year-old boy was stuck at the boom gate. It was not good. I don't know where this family is right now because we couldn't continue to serve them. But that's how we started, Jeremy. So my advice is don't give up. I think it's the drive, it's the will. There were many times, even in ABC, especially COVID, my gosh, there was not being able to operate, having no income. There were many big hurdles along the way, but I really feel as long as you stick true to what you're passionate in and you do good work. And again, as a business owner, I have learned to be financially literate.
Before this, I couldn't even, in building my own business over the past 8 years, I had learned how to. My wife used to manage all my cash, literally. She could run away and I'll be homeless. But yes, I've learned to, because running a business, you cannot not know.
You need to know. And that's another thing I would have to say. So all of this experience, but you really need to know finance, you know. And I don't come from a finance background. I come from psychology. It's completely,
I studied psychology in university as well. So I have a great appreciation for that.
So so it's completely different. But also running a company is not just, I'm passionate. You really need to educate yourself. And that is something that I'm still journeying through. The process is still ongoing, and I learn new things every day, you know, especially as we get bigger. Bigger doesn't always mean great, also means a lot more cost, you know, so you have to be incredibly financially literate to make these decisions. That's been a decade ago. If 10 years ago, if I were to think today I'll be sitting here with you, I would probably not believe it. At that point I thought it was the end. We are really blessed. I mean, it comes with hard work, but I really think because of the work that we do is good. I think we've got a lot of grace because of that.
For sure. That's incredible. I want to end off with one last question. What's your North Star now? I mean, for ABC or for yourself in all of this?
That's a good question. I really want to hopefully move towards a point that anyone can access our services. We are very far from that, but there are many nations in the world that have better support. I really hope not too long from now, more families can access quality intervention. The next thing would be also for there to be regulation. We need regulation because there's so poor regulation in Malaysia. Again, a lot of people who mean well but may not have the right tools. We are working with people, you know, real humans. So we really need to have some level of training to provide this kind of support. So I believe the credentialing is coming along. More and more people are working on this, and I see there has been a change. But that's the goal, you know, that at some point that more families can access quality intervention for a fraction of the cost. And so that we can reach out to more families and do the good work for more families. Of course.
Thank you, Charlene. I mean, I've enjoyed this conversation. I wish it could go on for much longer. There's so many topics I would love to cover around special needs, but thank you so much, Charlene.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, this has been an incredible conversation. I hope this brings a lot more attention to children with autism, special needs. I think it's still a topic that is a lot more can be done. There are a lot of good people like Charlene, I believe, out there who
100%.
Want to make a difference. And you can get support from everywhere. Like you said, just some great people from another clinic many years ago, investors who are willing to invest into this kind of an industry. But this is meaningful work, and it's such a pleasure to speak to you and to know what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me.
Yes, it's a pleasure. So this is the Untold Story of Charlene and ABC, and we very much thank her for today's time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Untold Stories with me, Jeremy. And if you enjoyed these stories, please feel free to like and subscribe to us on YouTube and Anchor. I look forward to telling you more untold stories of inspiring founders who have made a difference in their industries. Until then, see you again soon.